Welcome to the January edition of the YD3 Show, and a Happy New Year officially to all of you. Feels like it's been a while since we've been on the air. Obviously, the last recorded show we put together was in November. We did have the live edition of the Gallardi Trophy presentation done in December. If you get a chance, you can always go to the YD3 Show and catch up on those episodes if you happen to have missed them. We are here at the National Convention for the NCAA outside Washington, D.C. at the Gaylord Hotel and Convention Center in National Harbor. And it was our first opportunity to come here to the National Convention, and we certainly picked the perfect time to come. Not only because it's convenient for location for us, but more importantly, how many topics were on the table in Division III and how important many of those topics were. We touched on them a little bit in November. It certainly has been a topic of conversation in many ways for a lot of those votes for a few months now. We'll talk a little bit about how those outcomes and some of those votes went and what that means for Division III. We also got a chance to talk to student athletes here who were members of the SAAC, especially the National SAAC, on what the experience was like to be at the National Convention and not only be here, but have a voice and a vote on matters that were so important to Division III. It's a model that has been emulated now, and we heard it throughout the weekend in Division I and Division II now. They see that the student athletes get a voice in Division III, and now they want to make sure their student athletes in those two divisions have a voice as well. On this show, we'll talk to the outgoing chair, national chair of the SAAC for Student Athletes Advisory Council. We'll talk to her. We'll also talk to the outgoing member who was on the Management Council, one of two votes that student athletes have there. We'll talk to both of them. Also talk to a student athlete who's on his way onto the National SAAC and what it was like to be at the convention ahead of his responsibilities, as it were, and to almost kind of get into the groove before he has to jump in with both feet. And really also hear from their experiences of being here at the convention and also having the eye-opening understanding of how everything works and how the legislation is done and how it's voted on and how it is dissected, as it were, and debated and tackled throughout the weekend and, of course, time leading up. From what I gathered, being my first convention, and for many student athletes I talked to who are either here because they wanted to come on their own and use grant money through conferences or schools, or are members of SAAC and certainly wanted to take this in. This was an eye-opening experience to get an understanding and appreciation for why and how it all works. So certainly one of those great moments as I talk to student athletes on camera and certainly off camera throughout the weekend. Number of issues were being tackled in Division III. Again, we'll talk about those as we move along. But most importantly, the one thing I gathered from a lot of this is Division III may be at a bit of a crossroads, not in a negative way, but looking towards the future, dealing with financial problems, while at the same time trying to do what's best for the student athlete, doing best for their colleges, etc., and even conferences, etc., etc. And just the challenge of all of that combined into simple votes on 15 proposals now and certainly ones in the future. It was very interesting to watch, and I'm certainly glad I came. We may have to make this an annual event for us. Also coming up on the show, we're going to introduce you to an Eastern Connecticut student athlete who had to battle off one of the toughest diseases we ever have to battle, but he didn't do it alone. How his school, his team, his athletic department, etc., rallied around him, and why it's such a great moment at Eastern Connecticut. We'll also have our YD3 in 3 words. It returns in January. Got a few of those options here at the National Convention. We also got a few submitted by you, and we thank you. We'll showcase those coming up here on the show. Remember, you can always follow us on Twitter at YD3 Show, or simply use the hashtag YD3. If you have ideas that you think we should cover, or you have student athletes you think should be showcased, or even coaches and administrators who deserve the attention, let us know. We certainly would love to hear from you and hear from them as well. Again, Twitter at YD3 Show. You can use the hashtag YD3, or you can certainly go to Facebook and go to facebook.com/YD3 Show. Coming up, we'll tackle those topics. We'll also hear from the outgoing chair of the President's Council, President Sharon Herzberger from Whittier. That's all coming up on the show, along with the student athletes that we mentioned here. On the YD3 show from the National Convention.
What makes D3 special is the ability to participate in my team and within the broader community.
The perfect ending to a perfect season.
Being a D3 student athlete has completely expanded my life.
I learned how to lead. I really found a voice.
What time is it?
It's more about the experience rather than just a sport itself.
Without the experience of being a Division III student athlete, I wouldn't be the person who I am today.
NCAA Division III. Discover, develop, dedicate.
I know sports is important, but having the academic part along with it is a big plus.
I've discovered in myself, a newfound ability to overcome adversity at all different angles.
At a Division III school is really shaped around you developing yourself as a complete individual. The end result in my mind is you just become a very well-rounded person.
Before I came into college, I didn't really think I'd be able to balance so much. It helps a lot that you have a family with your team that can guide you.
With a D3 school, there's a lot of time for other opportunities. The coaches expect a lot of you during soccer, but after soccer, that's your own personal time to really find out who you are and other opportunities that you can pursue.
By balancing all of my interests, basketball, my leadership skills, and academics, I'm able to better prioritize my life and to manage it.
Welcome back to the YD3 show. We're in our home studios now. This is the home studios also of Hoopsville, the only show dedicated to Division III basketball in the world. You can follow Hoopsville on Twitter at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. In the stretch drive for Division III basketball, so tune in every Sunday and Thursday starting at 7 o'clock Eastern Time to catch up. You can also find it on demand as well. Just go to d3hoopsville.com for more information. Also want to point out, wearing a Division III shirt, something we're going to do from now on both Hoopsville and the YD3 show. We will showcase not only shirts or other paraphernalia that we have gotten from Division III schools, but we'll certainly wear it as well. You'll notice the DeSales Athletics polo along with the DeSales Athletics shirt in the background. You remember DeSales gave us the great story in October of their student athlete. If you have other ideas or stories you'd like to share with us, make sure you email us, yd3show@d3sports.com. Also, you can tweet us at YD3show or use the hashtag YD3. And of course, you can also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/YD3show. Let's go back to the NCAA Convention and talk about some of the items that were voted on at the convention. 15 in total were voted on by the members of the Division III group, as it were. Everybody has a vote and gets to determine the direction of the division based on many items that are at the table, whether it be financial, number of games, recruiting items. There were 15 in total that were on the table. 14 of the 15 were actually voted on. One of the items was actually referred, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. You'll also get to hear from Vice President Dan Dutcher briefly on some of these topics and his thoughts on how those votes went. You'll also get to hear to outgoing chair of the Presidential Council, President from Whittier, Sharon Herzberger, who also discussed some of the items. The first one that certainly had plenty of interest heading in, but ended up not being voted on in its original state, was the 10% reduction. It was voted on by the Division III to be referred. And what that means is it is going back to the Management's Council, and specifically it is going to the Playing and Practices Subcommittee to take a much more comprehensive look at the entire topic of the number of games being played in Division III by a majority of the sports. In its initial state, 10% reduction at the most of games in all sports except those played once a week. Those once-a-week sports were football. They were also cross-country, track and field, etc. As far as the 10% reduction, sports like baseball and softball were seeing up to 4 games reduced potentially by the bill that was at the table. Basketball, for example, 1 game and 1 scrimmage. There was an amendment that ice hockey would have the same as basketball. However, That never came to the table because the vote to refer came up first. There was certainly plenty of discussion about that over a few days, and eventually that was passed. So a comprehensive study will now take place. Now this opens up the door. This was the first time in 10 years that this was that there's a study been taken forth on this topic, and this will open up the door not only to the amount of games being played, but also non-traditional seasons may be looked at, and practice schedules, etc. So we may see a much more comprehensive look at this topic of the amount of time student athletes take up in athletics, along with how much time they might miss class time. But that will come down in the next year or two before this is tackled again, but at least the conversation now will certainly be held in earnest. The other topic that certainly was of importance, at least to at least one sport, was the football non-traditional season, and that got a little confusing for some. Football does have a spring session, as it were, but it's more about going through the mechanics or lifting and whatnot. There's no pads, there's no helmets, so there's no hitting as a result. And football coaches have been asking for more of that, and that's certainly what this basically was developed into. Basically, over 5 weeks, 14 days worth of pads and helmets. It certainly had the most debate. It initially failed by about 22 votes when it was first voted on. About 80-plus schools abstained from voting. Most of those, if not all of them, were schools that were non-football sponsored schools. Because of the close nature of the vote, it did come up for reconsideration. That drew on even more debate. And this point, it was interesting, was a number of football schools who actually came out and spoke against the idea, while there was certainly plenty of football schools that spoke in favor of this bill. It eventually was voted on yet again, and by a closer margin, it still unfortunately failed for football coaches and players. Less schools also abstained from the vote, which was a point of it became more than a football topic, certainly. And really what was interesting was the number of football schools in favor of it, asking those who would normally abstain to vote, which I thought was interesting. I think they felt that maybe they could get some traction from those who don't have football programs. Long and the short of it, it won't happen this time around. It does not mean we're not making strides towards maybe having a football non-traditional season involving hitting and pads and helmets. However, at the same time, with a new comprehensive study of the practice and playing seasons, the entire topic is going to be up for debate. And here's what Dan Dutcher had to say about the football vote, both at the convention and moving forward.
Once you start talking about adding contact, I think that's a really fundamental change. And I'm not arguing against it or for it, but it seemed that the recommendation to include contact, that really, I think, begins to ask questions about proper facilities, proper support, especially from training staff. It begins to add another layer of complication that doesn't exist in the current model. Ultimately, it seemed that the membership was not quite ready to go forward with a full, comprehensive spring football practice model that included contact. But that's probably the largest vote in favor of that kind of concept that we've had in a while. And I thought that was significant. So when you think about the proposal I just mentioned, the comprehensive playing and practice season review, certainly there'll be a place in that discussion for football, both the regular season and what might happen during the non-traditional spring segment.
So certainly football will go back to the drawing board, as it were, but as you heard Dan say, things have progressively inched forward towards maybe something that will be passed in the future. Again, how this will play out with the subcommittee on practices and playing seasons taking a look at the entire structure of Division III will be fascinating to see over the next year or two. Another big topic that certainly was on the table was recruiting and changing some of the structure of Division III recruiting, which is pretty limited when you compare it to the rest of the NCAA. And some things were voted on and adapted, and one not adopted, and we'll take a look at those. Adopted, for example, coaches can now contact sophomore students after they've completed their high school year, sophomore year. So in other words, once they've completed that sophomore year and become officially juniors, they can now contact those recruits. On-site visits now allowed to start on January 1 of a junior year of high school versus waiting until the first day of the senior year. The topic there being the fact that a lot of juniors are already looking at colleges in that second semester of their junior year, and really they have for a long time. This allows the coaches to at least start having on-site visits at the same time. Non-binding letters of intent will now be able to be signed by Division III future student athletes. The idea being maybe publicity for Division III just a little bit, especially in smaller towns with maybe some smaller media. It's non-binding, so a student athlete could certainly change their mind. There was some concern that maybe student athletes would change their minds a little bit more often. I think in the long run, I think a lot of people decided that really student athletes going to Division III are going to make up their mind about a college well before they decide to sign a letter of intent. And contact each day at multi-day events. This was changed around. There was an amendment that basically said, let's wait until at least the end of that day, so not to distract a student athlete during the middle of an event. The previous was you had to wait to the end of the entire multi-day event. Now at least a coach can talk to a student athlete at the end of each day of an event. In case a coach can only get to one. The one that was defeated was the on-campus evaluations of students. This came down basically to whether that was a Division III thing. Students are coming to Division III schools and looking at Division III schools because they are students first. And while certainly evaluating a student athlete at that campus will allow a coach to maybe not have to travel as much, on the flip side, especially the SAAC and the National SAAC felt that that didn't speak to the nature of Division III, especially the idea that you're essentially trying out when you come to visit a school. So that was defeated, and defeated somewhat soundly as well. Certainly plenty more was discussed at the table and voted on. A number of items certainly that will affect some of the seasons as well. The first and foremost, in men's and women's basketball, it has been adopted that if the season were to start on November 15th, and that is a Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, then teams can actually start the prior Friday. How that relates, for example, this upcoming season, the 15th is on a Sunday, so teams will be allowed to play starting Friday, November 13th. Now, that's only if it's Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. If the season starts on a Tuesday, or the November 15th falls on Tuesday, that will be the start date moving forward. But for example, this upcoming season, this 15th is on a Sunday, and so thus the season can begin as early as November 13th. And for football, they adopted as well the fact that the Thursday prior to the opening weekend is allowed to start as well. So teams might be able to get a Thursday night game in, for example. That would be September 3rd of 2015. Really, that was more a semantic type thing. They just wanted to make sure teams could play on that Thursday if they so chose to. Another date of importance, or at least in preseason, soccer, both men's and women's volleyball will be allowed an exempted preseason scrimmage or exhibition prior to the start of regular season. They didn't have that in place right now. This is starting next year. They'll at least be allowed to have one scrimmage or exhibition added on, so thus in the preseason. Field hockey, not a part of that conversation, though I did hear rumblings that that might come up for a vote next year. Also, women's sand volleyball. First, Division III approved it to be an NCAA championship, making it the 90th championship in the NCAA. Then they went and also approved the sport for Division III. There is currently no Division III school that has the sport, even in a preliminary stage. So this would be something that Division III schools would be adding. Right now, it is a championship for the NCAA, and it will be a championship for the NCAA Division III once there are enough schools to do that. So that's another significant date or item for student athletes. And the right schools will decide to use that. We'll see how that all plays out. Moving forward, certainly a lot of things on the table. I wanted to get a sense from outgoing chair of the President's Council, Whittier President Sharon Herzberger, her thoughts of the NCAA Convention and what she thought the challenges were moving forward. Here's a little bit of what she had to say in an interview we had after the convention.
The biggest challenge really is in terms of the cost of college today, and that's going to affect athletics just as it affects every element of the college or university experience, and we've got to be mindful of that. We can't keep adding, and we have to go back to the basics. And one of my mantras that I would repeat often is the basics are participation. Students being able to participate in these wonderful athletic experiences and learning from the participation. And we've got to figure out how to protect that as we're going forward.
I want to thank Sharon Herzberger for joining me after the convention. She's certainly eager to talk with me, and I was certainly appreciative of that. Also want to thank Dan Dutcher for joining us. You can get more of their interviews by following us on our YouTube page. We have their interviews there, including Dan's split out a little bit. It was a long conversation with Dan Dutcher. We also have his full interview if you want to listen to it, and plenty more on d3sports.com as well. When we come back, we're going to change gears just a little bit and step away from the convention for a brief bit and head up to Eastern Connecticut, where we hear about the incredible story of a student athlete who overcame quite a bit, all thanks to his teammates and his school, along with plenty of good friends and good support staff, as it were. We'll hear that story from Eastern Connecticut coming up right here on the YD3 Show.
I used to never really talk, ever. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. It helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at d3hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Welcome back to the YD3 Show from our studios and also the home of the Hoopsville as well. I am your host, Dave McHugh, and we're going to take a step away from the NCAA Convention briefly to bring you a story about a student athlete who has certainly overcome quite a bit to get back on the soccer field. And of course, we're talking about a fall sport, so forgive us to take a step in that direction. For John DeCasanova, getting back on the soccer field certainly seemed like a bit of a reach, as it were, as he had to battle certainly a major health scare. But it was his teammates and his school and certainly a big support staff that helped him back on the field. And Nick Ancafora gives us the story of how he got back on and certainly scored in more ways than one.
Meet John DeCasanova. John grew up in Philadelphia and moved to Glastonbury, Connecticut when he was 5 years old. When John was finishing high school, he knew he wanted to play soccer at the next level. After meeting men's head soccer coach Greg DeVito, John decided to attend Eastern Connecticut State University. He is studying sports and leisure management and is in his senior year. In the summer of 2012, John was taking a week-long course on campus. It was then that he noticed something wasn't right.
I didn't think it was serious at first. I started feeling tired. I thought, I was just tired from taking this long summer course. It was a lot of hours in a day. But eventually I sort of began to realize something else was wrong.
Well, it was difficult because I really didn't see him. Between my working him at class, he was actually living, had an apartment here, so he stayed there. I didn't see him. It wasn't until, and I did tell him to go to the doctors.
I eventually actually developed yellowing in the eyes, which is jaundice. And then I really knew something was sort of wrong and went to the hospital.
When he started to get jaundice in his eyes, and when there was one night he started urinating blood, and that's when I knew that it was something serious.
The doctors diagnosed John with hepatitis. It was only a short time after John was diagnosed with aplastic anemia. Being such a rare disease, John and his loved ones didn't know much about it.
I didn't quite know what aplastic anemia was, so it was frightening, but at the same time I had a lot of questions that I wanted answers to.
I was like, okay, how did he get hepatitis? Now, how did he get aplastic anemia? No, I did not know that much about it at all. I mean, you hear these things and you're just like, okay, what do we do and how do we manage this?
Everyone soon learned that John was going to need a bone marrow transplant to help fight the aplastic anemia. When Greg DeVito was informed, he took action immediately. DeVito contacted Be The Match, a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to helping every patient get a life-saving transplant that they need. DeVito and former Eastern Athletic Director Jeff Conan set up a bone marrow drive at Eastern. No one knew what to expect, but what happened was quite special.
When we saw the turnout that we had, which was hundreds of people lined up and waiting lists and having to turn people away at the end of the day because we just didn't have any more cards for them to register, when we were sending him pictures of that, and he saw that, he was just overwhelmed with how many people from our campus came out to support.
It was pretty amazing. I got pictures and videos, that whole day. In the last 2 years, there's definitely been a lot of, crying. But I sort of figured out that day I had never cried more.
That was, absolutely impressive just for what the coach and the team had put together.
I was shocked and I was just amazed. I was so grateful for the amount of people that came out.
The line went out of the conference room, down the hall, outside, down the sidewalk towards the media building. It was amazing. The kids were just phenomenal.
It was one of the most moving things that I've ever seen in my life, not just in athletics.
It's crazy how a small community can come together. I think it's amazing.
John was overwhelmed with all the support, although the most amazing part was how he was so appreciative of the turnout and had a selfless approach.
It was really an unbelievable experience. And one of the other best parts about it is, if I did, not make it, at least we were saving so many other lives.
He looked at the drives as not only this could help me, but this could help somebody else. Knowing that he's such a selfless person, it just came out even more when he got sick. And I think that kind of solidified the kind of person that he was, and people saw the kind of person that he truly was.
Having that support behind you is so needed. It was a hard time, and I couldn't have done it without my friends, my family, just all these other people that are reaching out to me.
After being in the hospital for longer than anyone had expected, John finally found a cord match. Doctors took cells from 2 cords for the transplant. The objective of the cord transplant is for one of the 2 cord cells to create a new immune system. Luckily for him, it's exactly what happened. After being released from the hospital, John returned home and hopes to continue on with his life. It was soon that more bad news had broke.
I was recovering from the aplastic anemia for like 2 weeks or so before I started growing a mass in my throat. It was pretty big, pretty disgusting, and we decided I had to go back up to Boston to get testing done. It ended up getting so big, we figured out it was actually a tumor.
He was diagnosed with lymphoma. Just when everyone thought it was time to move on, John was back in the hospital.
I was terrified. I knew that aplastic anemia was already bad. It wasn't considered a cancer, but then I knew that lymphoma was cancer, and it was really scary to see that he was doing so well, and I thought that was it. I thought he was done with hospitals, he was done, he was on the right track, and then we just got knocked back down.
We're all excited like he's out, but then to hear that and hear he had to go back, it was brutal. It was just a roller coaster because you go up, go down.
Well, that was the breakdown. That was a bad period.
It's pretty bad.
I know I definitely shed a lot of tears.
So I'm heading off to radiation, and gotta get gowned up because coming out of the room. So, but off the radiation, and hopefully it can kick some tumor ass. So.
For someone who had fought so hard, it was tough for everyone to see John back at the hospital. People always ask, why do bad things happen to good people? For John, he always asked himself why.
You know, I asked almost everyone. I asked my mom, you know, I would ask my friends sometimes, you know, and I would definitely sort of look up and be, come on, man, why me?
I always thought to myself why I didn't understand why someone that good and such a great person would deserve to go through something like this, and I still don't understand it.
It's hard to sort of, as humans, it's hard for us to depict that there is a reason, but, you know, there is.
Oh, hello there. So, I'm about to get chemo, and I would just want to say hi first. And my mom just want to say hi too. And yeah, so about to kick some ass, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, just thought you should know. Bye-bye.
While in the hospital, feeling the support of his family and friends was crucial. In order to beat cancer, he needed a positive mindset.
You know, when you're in the hospital for so long, you know, you don't feel normal. You are not normal. And my friends were there, you know, all the time to give me that feeling back, just a little bit.
It was fun though, cause like we would make fun of like stuff he'd have to do. Like he would like get out of bed and have to like do something. I'd be like, hey man, can you move any slower? Or so, like little things like that.
It was the little things in life that kept the light shining on John's future. Whether watching John struggle through chemotherapy or laughing sitting by his bedside, everyone remembers a moment with John.
One day sticks out in particular, and it's, you know, it's kind of when he's out of the hospital for the first time and he shows up at Nevers Field in September, and you turn around and you're getting ready for a game and you're thinking about, oh, you know, how are we going to do today? And, you know, we're going to win this game, and are the guys ready? And then you turn around and see him standing there. And it's, you know, it's kind of like an angel came down from the sky, and there he is, and it sort of puts your life into perspective pretty quick as far as, you know, what's important now.
I had just recently gotten released from Sloan Kettering and was finally able to, you know, walk around outside. And at that point, it had almost been a year that I had been in a hospital.
We were in New York City, and he wanted to go and walk around. And I was like, all right, you know, if you feel up to it, let's go. We walked around. I had to be like an hour and a half, which is good for him at that time. And it was probably like 3 o'clock in the morning, because that's the only time that there wasn't a lot of people out, and he wanted to walk around. I was like, okay, I'm tired, you know, fine, let's do this. And he was just talking about how he wanted to get another chance. Like he just wanted this to all work out.
I wanted to just go walk around, you know, New York. You know, obviously New York is the sleepless city. You know, it makes you feel alive. And that's what I wanted to feel.
And there was a security guard. I got there at night. I stayed overnight with him. Walked in, and the security guard, you know, stopped me, and you know, he said, you know, I guess you can't stay overnight if you're not a family member. And so on the list that John had marked down, he marked me down as his brother, that I was staying overnight with him, which, with the whole emotional roller coaster, shed a few tears walking up the stairs to find his room. But you know, John's just sitting in his bed with the most miserable look on his face. And he's just like, hey, what's up? And I was like, no, you know, nothing, whatever, just hanging out. He's like, sorry if I woke you up last night. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I guess he'd been up all night coughing, and all of his nurses there, and he just, I don't know, it was kind of funny. He got a few laughs out of it, but I didn't wake up, and I don't know, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that look on his face.
I remember going to the hospital in New York with him, and I just bought this sweet little camera thing, so I was like, I'm gonna film my little trip to see John. And I'm walking on the streets with my little stabilizer, and I go into the hospital, and the security guard just goes, stop, put that thing down, you can't bring that in here. So I was like, what the hell did what I do? and so they take all my cameras, they take all the equipment, but I sneak my camera in my little bag. I bring it upstairs to the room, and the whole point of that trip was to get a little soundbite from John that he could send out to his friends. So I had this little tripod like that big, set it on a table, we put up the curtain, and I did a quick 3-minute interview with him. And while the interview's about wrapping up, you hear the door open or the doctor's coming in, and I know I can't have my camera there, I'm freaking out. I'm like, John, go, John, quicker. And he's like, he's just wrapping it up, and the doctors just start opening it, and I just take the camera, smooth move it, and just go sit in the chair. And I thought that was cool to see him be normal with me like that, because that's the kind of stuff we would do at home.
Although many people came to visit him in the hospital, his mother Karen was there the most. She always found time to take care of her son.
Just sometimes just seeing him curled up in a ball, that you look at your son and go, how did he ever get this bad? You don't want to ever see your child as ill as that was. It was a difficult walk, but I tried to stay strong for him and not show too much emotion because I didn't want him to get down.
She's a very strong woman, and she did an amazing job.
She was always positive. She would hold his hand throughout everything. She would tell him that everything's gonna be all right, and she was definitely his main support.
His mom was probably the pillar of support for John, because she was going to work, she was going back to Glastonbury, she was going to the city, she would go on business trips. She would make sure that when she was going on business trips, we were there lined up so that he wouldn't be alone.
On the soccer field when our games would end, we walk across the field and everybody gets, a few minutes to spend with their family, and he just, he runs right up and gives his mom a big hug, and, they are best friends.
John always kept his hopes up, and there was one moment he'll never forget.
For a while, my numbers, because of all the chemo, and radiation, had been at 0. And they did not budge for almost over a year. But this one important number that we looked at every day, one day it just became 0.06. And I know to a lot of people that sounds like ridiculous, because you're looking at a number that's supposed to be like above 200, right? But when you're at 0 for 1 year and then you hit 0.06, that's a feeling right there.
He would undergo a special study, one that would hopefully save his life. The T-cell study that John would undergo involved a third party that gave up their T-cells. After the cancer, John did not have any T-cells. So essentially, these T-cells would keep him alive until one day his T-cells would come back. He was released from the hospital in September of 2013. One day, he went for a normal visit for a PET scan. He went home, and on his way to class the following day, John received a phone call he'll never forget.
That was definitely a surreal moment. I was right in the middle of campus, and in front of Webb Hall, which is the middle of Eastern. I got the call, and I was about to go into class, and they told me what had happened, and my scans were completely cancer-free. I didn't even know how to react at the time. I didn't have anyone specifically with me, but the most amazing part about it was everyone was there. It was the middle of campus. It was exactly where I wanted to be after the last 2 years of, this whole school, family, friends, supporting me. I couldn't have imagined a better place to be while getting this call. It was pretty unbelievable.
The great news spread across the Eastern campus and to all of John's friends.
Called Mama D right away. She was definitely the first person, I would talk to.
He can be so inspiring. It just brought tears. Then I basically broke down with him, even though I wasn't with him. Just amazing what he's gone through, and just looking back and saying all that time, and still seeing improvements over him. He still has, the road just to get himself physically back there, but he's getting there.
Prior to the 2014 soccer season, John expressed how he would feel if he got a chance to put back on number 11.
That would be something. I don't even know if I have words for that. it would be one of the most amazing things of my life, if not the most amazing thing of my life.
John did get that chance as he played his first intercollegiate game in 2 years.
And ladies and gentlemen, making his first appearance at Thomas Nevers Field since November 5th, 2011, the senior captain from Glastonbury, number 11, John D. Casanova.
5 games later, his dream came true.
Jones sending it through to the Casanova. The Casanova goal! For the first time since November of 2011, John de Casanova scores a goal for Eastern Connecticut.
John's story is remarkable, and there are many different words that can describe it.
I would have to go with my favorite word, and that would be relentless. You know, there was no way I'd get through what I did. You know, there's no way anyone can, you know, get through the battles of life if they're not relentless. You know, nothing will hit you harder than life, you know, that's for sure. But if you are relentless, if you keep, I know it sounds cliche, but if you never give up, you know, you can get there. You know, and being relentless to me was the key. You know, so many bad things happen to me, but when bad things happen to you, you don't just sit there and, you know, pout about it. You do something about it. You know, you fight back. You know, cancer chose me, and I decided to fight it back, and that's pretty much what happened.
Pure inspiration, like that's all he is. He was meant here. He was brought here to do something big. You know, he's just a very inspirational person.
He emulates true strength in a human being. That's the story.
Thank you, Nick Akinfora, for that story out of Eastern Connecticut. Hats off to John de Casanova for his efforts to not only beat the long odds of his health, but get back on the soccer field as well. And we tip our hat to him and all the student athletes who have to overcome quite a bit to fulfill their dreams. If you have a story idea for us that you'd like to share, we certainly would love to showcase a story that you have put together. Email us, yd3show@d3sports.com. You can also tweet us at yd3show or use the hashtag yd3. And you can also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/yd3show. We love to tell your stories, and we love it even more if you're the ones telling it for us. So get in touch with us, and we'll share your stories right here on the YD3 Show. Coming up, we'll go back to the NCAA Convention to get the student-athletes' point of view. We'll hear from a couple SAAC members who are finished with their duties on the National SAAC, find out what was so important to them about standing up for the student-athletes and why the Division III model is now so appreciated in the rest of the NCAA. We'll also hear from a student-athlete who's stepping on to the National Committee and how that is certainly going to be a challenge and why he's certainly glad he went to the convention to get a little bit of an insider's idea of how it all works. Also coming up, we'll get an update on Lauryn Hill, and we'll talk to a student athlete about playing 2 different sports. That's all coming up right here on the YD3 Show.
Division III allows you to be able to give yourself to other things, not even just participate in them, but really get involved with them if you want to.
There's a lot of interaction. It's not just sitting back, taking notes. You're actually doing hands-on things and better preparing yourself for your major.
Choosing a Division III school, I've had the opportunity to develop my leadership skills and to be more involved on campus.
Division III in athletics, affords students the opportunity not only to participate in intercollegiate athletics at a competitive level, but also gives them the opportunity to, engage in the other interests in their campus and in their lives outside of that sport and outside of the academics on the campus.
And to have opportunity to have time to join clubs and being able to play basketball, it allows you to just be able to do everything you want to do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
What makes D3 special is the ability to participate in my team and within the broader community.
The perfect ending to a perfect season.
Being a D3 student athlete has completely expanded my life.
I learned how to lead. I really found a voice.
What time is it?
It's more about the experience rather than just a sport itself.
Without the experience of being a Division III student athlete, I wouldn't be the person who I am today.
NCAA Division III. Discover, develop, dedicate.
Welcome back to the YD3 show. I am Dave McHugh here at the NCAA Convention. I'm joined by the outgoing chair of the National SAAC for Division III, Chelsea Shoemaker, who is a graduate of RIT and a former women's soccer player. First and foremost, what was the experience like being the chair of the National SAAC?
Oh, it was an incredible opportunity. I think one of the best things that we get to do is represent all the 180,000 student athletes across the division, but specifically serving as chair of this committee. There's no one better than the group of people that were in the room with us, and I know that moving forward next year they're going to do an incredible job to really make sure the student athlete voice is heard even more than I feel we were at this convention. Division III, obviously the SAAC and the student have been the voice. They've been allowed to vote. They have a say and they even get a chance to express their opinions of the legislation. Something we heard at this convention was how D2 and D1 are adopting that model and how much that works. What's that mean to you as a student athlete, especially in Division III? I think that Division III's had it right. I think that by giving the student athletes an opportunity not only to have a voice, but to really, have a vote is really important, especially when there's a lot of decisions going on across the association, and a lot of those will affect Division III. So I think it's really important to have student athletes not just have the voice, but be able to also have their vote be heard. Of course, you're a student athlete yourself, having played soccer. What's it like to not only balance soccer with your academics, but also to balance that on top of being on a SAAC, both at your school, but then on a national scope as well? Yeah, I think, it's a huge honor. I had the opportunity, although I'm a former soccer and softball student athlete from RIT, looking back on that experience and remembering what it was like when I was on campus, I think the biggest thing is just we're so lucky to be able to not only serve as leaders on our team, but really to be able to get involved in other initiatives that don't have to do with being on the field or don't have to do with being in the campus. I think that there's so many issues that are, going on right now in Division III and all across the association with mental health and student athlete well-being. And so I think that, members of this committee is really important for us to get involved and, have a position and have a stance on those things and, make a difference in the division. Certainly seems like you're heard because of all the legislation. Only one vote did you guys not be in the majority on that you supported or didn't support, didn't go that way. Yeah. It certainly seems, at least from the outsider point of view, that your voice is being heard. Yeah, and that goes back to just a big thank you for all the administrators across Division III and, at the campus and the conference level, also the NCAA staff members. I think that one of the unique things that we remind ourselves is that we're representing the student-athlete voice. So we understand budget issues, we understand resource issues, but we make sure that when we come out on a stance for a piece of legislation that we're serving as the representatives of the students and the student-athletes. So well, you guys took on an initiative to start everything here on the final day at the NCAA Convention, but something you guys had been working on, and I know it's dear to you, the LGBTQ community, and getting them to understand you can play and you are welcome in Division III. We saw some conferences and some schools do that on their own. You guys took it on a national scale. What does that campaign mean to you? What does that campaign, do you think, mean to Division III? I think it's huge. I had an opportunity to go and complete a co-op outside of campus, and coming back, I think my eyes were open just to the fact that this isn't just for the individuals that are, coming to find themselves and coming out as LGBTQ, but I think it really goes to just making sure that those 17, 18, 19-year-olds are able to be themselves. Yeah. It's all about being themselves, and I touched on, a quote that I love from Michael Sam saying, look what can happen when you have the courage to be yourself, and I think that this committee is just a great representation of the fact that we represent people all over the country. In many different states and many different backgrounds. And when we first started talking about this, it was definitely not the most comfortable conversation. Sure. And I think that moving forward from there was just so much discussion and education and understanding and realizing that you don't just have to support those issues, but you're supporting respect. And so I think that I'm very proud of the work that the committee's done on that. And I think that it only sets the ball in motion for future initiatives and future projects to be grassroots efforts from the student athletes for the student athletes. And so I think that the It's On Us campaign's another great one that I'm sure they'll get involved with next year. And I think we just kind of set the precedent to not only write the proposals and use our own words, but to also make sure that it turns out to be a video on the business session floor at convention. So I'm really proud of that from a personal standpoint, in the sense of everyone on my committee did an incredible job with that project.
As outgoing national chair, anything you're going to look back on with good memories, or anything you're going to take with you that you're always going to treasure?
Yeah, absolutely. We just took a little time as a group to reflect on our experiences and not only give thanks to all the members in the room, but just to remind ourselves how much it's meant to us and let everyone else in the room know that. And at the end of the day, it's the people. I think a lot of us stressed that this committee and, you know, finding our passion for Division III athletics through working on National SAAC saved a lot of us. There's a lot of struggles that student athletes face on a daily basis, and I think that we all have so much pride in being able to say that even though we're former student athletes, we're Division III former student athletes, and I think that's something we'll all carry with us for a long time.
They had you busy here, by the way. You had a keynote speech on Thursday's luncheon. You had a few other items. You had to speak at the business, the start of business, and present the video. This was a bit of a business trip in some senses.
You know, it was. It was a whirlwind, but it was an incredible experience and opportunity. And I think that, you know, even though I was afforded the opportunity to speak at a lot of those things, I was just saying everything that, you know, everyone in that room on my group has said throughout the year. And, you know, they've really been incredible support systems to me. And I think that, you know, next year, the future chair, Amanda Ingersoll from Stevens Institute of Technology, she's going to do an incredible job with the committee. So I look forward to seeing what she does.
We'll look forward to talking to her as well later in the show. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would just say having the opportunity to really see the behind the scenes that goes on in Division III, you know, as serving on this committee, your voice really does matter. And as student athletes, I encourage you to get involved with your campus SAAC groups and to take part in these initiatives, like you mentioned, the You Can Play video, the It's On Us campaign. Those are really things that you can really have a huge impact on, and it all starts from us. So.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Chelsea Shoemaker, outgoing chair of the National SAAC.
Thank you.
Certainly a great conversation there with the outgoing national chair of the SAAC. Appreciate her taking the time to join us. She wasn't the only one on the way out after serving on a SAAC for the last few years. Talked to another student athlete who had a pretty important voice on the Management's Council. Now joined by Audrey Hester, former student athlete at Randolph-Macon, played field hockey and lacrosse. She's also part of the National SAAC, and you had the unique opportunity of one of the two voices that were on the Management Council. Tell us a little bit about what that responsibility was for you.
Sure. So on Division III, we have the opportunity to elect 2 people to the Management Council, which is a big deal. You know, Divisions 1 or 2 and 2, we're making decisions to allow a greater student athlete voice in their governance structure, and Division III has been doing that for years. So I was very proud to be elected to that by my peers of the committee. And so going to Management Council meetings was an amazing experience.
Sure.
You know, when I look at the governance structure, I think of President's Council as the ocean and Management Council as the waves.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, lots of big decisions get made, and Management Council are really the ones that figure out how things are going to get handled, what subcommittees need to take a look at things, and they make decisions on proposals and interpretations. And so they really are the heart and soul of how our governance structure functions and how it runs smoothly. So to have a voice as a student athlete on that, it is huge and something that I'm very proud we have the opportunity to do.
They talk about having a voice. Sometimes a lot of people go, okay, sure, they put a couple student athletes on the council, they're there, they might speak, but really in the grand scheme, they're not listening. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Tell us literally how this works.
Sure. So we are voting members on the Management Council. So the student athletes get 2 votes on Management Council. So whatever they vote on, 2 of those votes come from the student athletes. And so myself and Jaime Sausalito, who will also be on Management Council again next year, along with our new member, Taryn Strombach, they get 2 votes. And so it's not all the time that we get to go back and talk to all of our student athlete constituents. Right. We're kind of in the position of thinking on the broad scale and what would be good for student athletes as a whole. But a lot of times, you know, we consider what we've talked about, National SAAC, what we've learned from our campuses and all the campuses we represent, and we get to represent that voice. And so that's just, it's important, and it's a real heard voice. So
how complicated are the issues? You know, not details, but I mean, I would suspect you sit there sometimes going, okay, that's a lot more in depth than I thought this was going to be.
There are some things that go pretty over my head, especially when we're talking about budgetary issues,
sure.
Which is a big issue. And sometimes I sit there and I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. But, you know, you do have the opportunity to abstain if you really, truly don't know what's going on, which is a good thing. But, you know, some other things that go over my head a little bit is when we look at waivers.
Okay.
And that I personally love that process and going through, the proper steps to figure out, protocol for things. And it's sometimes it feels like I'm in the CIA a little bit because you get to do kind of an investigation process. So that's also fun.
What was the experience like in this year with some very heady topics that came up that had to be voted on, from budgetary to practices to changing dates on start times for seasons or allowing a scrimmage to take place, and then a lot regarding recruiting? There was a wide variety of items that you certainly had come across your desk, as it were. What was it like to serve this year?
Well, I can speak to one of the proposals, which was the proposal to allow on-campus evaluations. And just in going to my conference meetings, when I would give the SAAC's position and rationale for opposition, we swayed votes. And today on the business floor, we heard when we got up and read our position paper, people clapped.
Yeah.
And so I think that represented people listening to the student athletes and actually changing some minds and them recognizing that, yes, this is a recruiting issue, but it's also a student athlete issue. So that was a really cool experience to actually sway some votes and know that we are truly being heard.
And the voices thing, again, works in Division III. It's been around for a while. The big resonating message out of here that we've heard on the show and we heard all weekend, D1 and D2 are going, we're going to take that model too. We're going to allow our student athletes to have a voice as well. What does that mean to you as someone who has now gone through the whole process of being a voice?
Yeah, that means an incredible amount to me, because a lot of times D3 is kind of in the background, D1 and especially in D2 a little bit, have more visibility and people know more about them. And to know that they were taking our lead on something is just, it's almost indescribable how that feels, to know that we could also be a leader within the association.
A little surprising that they hadn't done it until now?
It kind of is, because, the association, the NCAA, is all about student athlete experience. And so to leave that voice out of how decisions get made is broken. And so to know that it's, they're fixing it now, but to know it had been broken is troubling, but I'm glad they've taken our lead and fixed that.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about it. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who might be watching and or maybe inspired to be a voice?
Yeah, so if any student athletes are watching, I would just encourage them to get involved and to, if they have an opinion, reach out to their campus leadership, their conference leadership, or even find out who their National SAAC rep is and reach out to them, because that makes our jobs easier. The more we know, the better the division is. So we just want to make sure we represent everybody. And so if they want to have that voice, it is completely possible.
Terrific. Audrey Hester, former student athlete at Randolph-Macon and now former Management Council SAAC representative as well. I want to thank both ladies for joining us here on the YD3 show. Certainly a great point of view and ideas from them about what is so important to serve on a SAAC, not only on a national scale, of course, but even getting involved on your own in your own athletics department at your own school. It's very good words, something I wish I had known as well when I was a student athlete myself. When we come back, we'll talk to another student athlete who's on his way onto the national committee, why he's kind of opened up to understanding what this all really means in the grand scheme of things, but also why he's looking forward to it, including balancing being a student athlete, a student, of course, and being on that SAAC. That's all coming up right here on the YD3 show.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at d3hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
I used to never really talk. Ever. I was scared and shy. It was hard to look at people's faces. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. I made friends and won lots of gold medals. but I learned more than just playing golf. Special Olympics helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
Welcome back to the YD3 show. I am Dave McHugh. We're here at the NCAA Convention, and one of the cool things about the convention is the opportunity for student athletes to not only experience it, but certainly take part. That's the whole Division III model. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm actually joined by Robert Wingert. Sorry, Rob. He is a student athlete at Stevenson University. He is a men's volleyball player, and you are transitioning to the National SAAC literally as of this moment. First and foremost, congratulations on that.
Thank you. I really appreciate it is quite an honor, so I'm really looking forward to the experience.
This is going to be a fascinating experience for you, but you've got to at least see what it's all about here at the NCAA Convention. What are your reactions to being able to come here and see all this in action?
At the beginning, I was taken back because I don't think I initially realized the workload that I was taking on by adding this to my slate. And starting on Wednesday, I was invited to shadow the National SAAC members throughout some of their preliminary meetings before the rest of the students were here. And I just want to, first of all, express my gratitude to all those National SAAC members, especially Audrey Hester. Thank you, Audrey. And I was able to get an inside look on what they do before we have our conference call at the end of January and our first meetings in April. And like I said, it's just such an honor, and I really, really am looking forward to getting to do that. And the whole convention was such a great experience because next year, when I arrive, it won't be my first convention. I'll have the experience of Washington, D.C. to look back on, so I kind of have already been on my first rodeo before I start next year.
And the timing's perfect. You're going right into the start of your season of men's volleyball. As you start to go into on the national chair for SAAC, you've pretty much blown your schedule completely apart.
Yeah, my plate's definitely full, which resembles my eating habits as well.
Nice.
But I was able to get a few days off from practice. I'm really thankful to Coach Grossnickel for allowing me that, and I was able to come down here since we're only an hour up the road at Stevenson. Yeah. And I definitely have a lot on my plate, so I'm going to get back and take a look at my schedule and hopefully be able to divide up my time between everything so I can not short myself on anything but still provide the service to everywhere that I'm committed right now.
At this convention, what was the one thing that has stood out as an experience or something that either you learned or didn't fully appreciate?
It's so hard to pick just one thing, but I would definitely have to say everything that National SAAC goes through to pick their stance on legislation. You might think that all the students agree in one way or another, but every issue, no matter how minute, is hotly debated, and they look at it from every angle. You might think, oh, they're only seeing the student-athlete's perspective, but that is not the case at all. They're looking at it from an angle of if you're an athletic director of the school, if you're an athletic trainer, a prospective student athlete. All of the people on National SAAC really do have incredible minds to be able to see these different angles, and they're able to take a step back from just the student athlete's perspective and see the whole picture, and it's really something I appreciated much more at the end of the convention, seeing them operate.
I should point out, I actually know Robert from Stevenson, and I see you around the athletics offices working in many different ways or talking with different coaches, not necessarily just your sport. You're involved with a lot of other things. Is that approach going to change maybe? Or are you going to get maybe even more involved now that you understand how much you really want to have a grip on before you go to the next convention?
Yeah, I mean, I'm already in touch all across my campus, and now I get to add 16 other campuses within my own conference. Just 16, and plus the 10 with the ODAC that I'll also be representing. So I have a big list on my phone of people I need to get in touch with that's only growing by the minute, but I really do look forward to the experience because that's something I love. I love getting in touch with the different administrators and coaches from our school, so I imagine I'll enjoy the same exact aspect at these other schools. And NCAA athletics has given so much to me in my life, from when I was a child at Wilkes University to where I am now, that I'm really excited to start giving back at a higher level on National SAAC.
What's really interesting to me is at the votes that we had at the convention, the SAAC really you ended up being in support of all but one of the proposals that got passed. Or in the case of, I should say, maybe you didn't support it and it didn't get passed. What I mean is you were on the side of the majority, except for the one in football. I don't want to go into those details, but what's it like to have that strong a voice that clearly seems to be listened to and respected by administrators?
That's really what makes it all worthwhile. You know that both the Management Council and the President's Council and everyone who's voting on these topics really does value what you have to say. You might think that it's just lip service when they say, oh, well, the student athletes have a voice. But beyond that, we have a voice that matters to these people. They know that we know what's best for us because we've gone out and done the work. So the fact that they appreciate what we do and take into consideration what we have to say means so much. And it's a big testament to all the hard work that National SAAC puts in.
And the other interesting thing is D2 and D1 are all now going, we're going to have our student athletes have a voice. That's worked in Division III for a long time. We heard that message over and over and over here. What does that mean? What does that resonate to you?
Once again, it's just a testimony to the great work that the Division III staff has done by giving us this voice originally, and also the voice that Division III has with its National SAAC, that they've done a good job where the association appreciates it and they're now applying it to the model across the board. I think it's a great step forward for the NCAA, and I think it'll make big strides in both those divisions as it has for us.
Let me put you on the spot a little bit. You guys came out today and talked about your support for You Can Play and the LGBTQ community and supporting them. That, I'm sure, was an interesting conversation. Don't want to know those details, but those are the kinds of things that the SAAC also takes pride in being ahead of the curve, maybe, or at least taking on social issues that affect you as a student athlete.
Yeah, in addition to doing legislation, which everyone knows is so much fun, we also like to get involved with hot button issues like the You Can Play campaign or the It's On Us campaign and volunteering with Special Olympics. It's so important for us to give back to the community that comes out and supports us in the athletic realm that we need to make sure we get out. And I wish I could have sat in on those conversations that took place way back when. But stepping on to the committee, it's so nice to know that we have that kind of voice also in social aspects, that we can make a difference to even one student athlete, like Chelsea said today, that it'll make a difference, and it's all worthwhile.
Before we let you go, anything you see on the horizon that you know you guys will be picking up right away to try and tackle?
I'm not sure. They were pretty focused on everything going on at this convention with all the legislation, so I'll have a better idea of that in April, and I really look forward to getting to work on it.
Outstanding. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to join us. On my basketball show, I always give the guests the final word. I don't normally do that with the YD3 show, but I really want you to get a final word as a student athlete. Any final thoughts for those who might be watching?
The only final thought I would have would be for student athletes to get involved in your local SAAC on your campus. You can make such a difference, and you may not think that's the case, but you really can. You just need to go out there and find other like-minded people who are willing to do that and do your best to make a difference so that our voices can be heard even better.
Very good. Robert Wingert, he is the men's volleyball player at Stevenson and now on the national committee for the National SAAC.
Thanks to Rob Wingert for joining me. He will be joining the National SAAC amongst many others, and we'll look forward to possibly talking to the chair of this year's National SAAC coming up on a future show of the YD3 show. Want to now toss to our YD3 in 3 words project. Didn't get a lot of submissions this year. This month, we certainly want to get more submissions from you, so please don't hesitate to do so. It can be from a school, a conference, a team. It can be as many as you want or as few, but we certainly want as many as possible. Many of those at the National Convention submitted their 3 words. So here is the January edition of the do that all over. You bumbled your way through it. 3, 2, 1. Thanks to Rob Wingert for joining me and talking about his opportunity being on the National SAAC. Hopefully in a future show, we'll be talking to the chair of the National SAAC about what their expectations are moving forward and, of course, what they hope to accomplish this year as well. Rob and many others at the National Convention took the time to also participate in the YD3 in 3 words project we have on the show. Haven't gotten a lot of submissions from you, and we encourage you to send in your student athlete submissions, whether it be a team, individual student athletes, or from a conference. We've even had SAACs send in theirs in the past, and we certainly encourage you to send in as many as possible. If there are too many for a show, we will save them for future shows. We promise you this, though. They will all make the air. But as I said, Rob and others helped us put this month's together. So here is this month's edition of YD3 in 3 words.
Balance, commitment, family.
Pride, passion, and potential.
Opportunity, unique, priceless.
The 3 words I would use to describe Division III are exploring your ambitions.
D3 means to me pride, dedication, and balance.
What D3 means to me would be giving, pursuit, and commitment.
Balance, excellence, pride.
Division III schools offer academic scholarships instead of athletic scholarships. This really puts the focus that the student athlete needs to maintain that GPA.
I did receive a non-athletic scholarship upon entering school.
I got the presidential scholarship, which was huge for me.
I think there's more opportunities for academic scholarships in Division III. A lot of people pick schools just based on the sport and don't get that experience.
Being a Division III athlete and developing my leadership skills has definitely put my name out there and helped me get more recognition on campus, but more recognition nationwide. I did win the Jostens Trophy, which is based on leadership, academics, and then how well you do on the court.
I'm also the Schwartz Scholar of my class. Schwartz Scholarship is basically a scholarship that is given to a student who's identified as a likely leader.
At the end of the day, it won't matter how they play on the field, it will matter how they do in the classroom.
What makes D3 special is the ability to participate in my team and within the broader community.
The perfect ending to a perfect season.
Being a D3 student athlete has completely expanded my life.
I learned how to lead. I really found a voice.
What time is it? Let's get it done!
It's more about the experience rather than just a sport itself.
Without the experience of being a Division III student athlete, I wouldn't be the person who I am today.
NCAA Division III. Discover, develop, dedicate.
And welcome back to the YD3 show. Of course, I'm Dave McHugh, and we are here at the NCAA Convention, as we have mentioned, certainly covering the goings-on here, but we're also talking to a number of the student athletes who have some sort of role, whether on SAACs or getting honored here in Washington, D.C. And I'm joined now by Megan Light, former student athlete, if I'm not mistaken, at Emory, played softball, but more importantly, certainly have done some great things in your life outside of just being an athlete. But let's start there, if you don't mind. First and foremost, thanks for joining me. And,
no problem.
You're being honored with the Top 10 award here by the NCAA. Significant honor. You were also a finalist for the Woman of the Year. So certainly you've been in the spotlight just a little bit for what you've been doing, not only on the field, but off of it as well. What's that like to have that kind of attention?
It's certainly really strange. Like, I play softball, you know, you sort of just think of yourself on the field,
Yeah.
but having met all of these people at the NCAA, meeting the other people who are being honored, it's really a great honor. I mean, to be recognized for the things you've done, you know, your teammates, your coaches, the staff here, it's just, especially, I'm done, I'm retired.
I know.
So being recognized afterwards, it's a good end to a great career.
I was going to say, not only were you a finalist for the Woman of the Year, which is a significant award in the NCAA, now you're being honored as, you know, the top 10 basically from the NCAA. Have you gathered what that means to not only you, but it also means to Emory and to everybody else that you've been associated with?
It's slowly sinking in. It's, of course, I sort of, you know, just take it as being part of a student athlete, but then you get here and you realize it's really a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, they're really taking care of us here, and so everyone at Emory, they're, you know, thrilled. It's making a great representation for the university, the student athletes, the university. I mean, I couldn't say better things about my experience, so it's nice to be recognized here and then reflect back on Emory.
You had a pretty stellar career in softball, set quite a few records at the school. What was that experience like to be able to play the sport you clearly love, be so successful at it at a very top-notch school on top of that, but then also succeed in the classroom as well?
It was definitely a challenge. I'm not going to say it was easy. Softball was hard. My coach was intense. Practices were hard. But it was all worth it. Obviously, we did really well as a team. I did really well individually, and just on the field, it was more than I could have imagined coming out of, you know, like high school softball. And so it was a great athletic experience. You know, I couldn't have asked for anything better. It was exactly what I wanted and more. And so that aspect was amazing. I continued my softball career.
not so much anymore. But,
Sure.
But for those 4 years, it was the athletic experience was amazing.
I'm sure there's a few adult leagues that would love to have you on their team, a little ringer to bring in.
I play slow pitch.
Yeah. Oh, that's got to be hard to adjust to.
It was hard at first, but I've gotten it down now.
Have you figured it out? I know some people who actually switch their righties, they'll actually hit left.
I've managed to stay righty, luckily.
Okay.
I'm not the fastest person in the world, so I have to hit it out of the infield. But I've definitely, I play actually with a group of ex-Emory softball, and some baseball players, and so
it's a little bit of the camaraderie of the
Yeah.
former student athlete.
Keeping the competition.
Yeah, exactly. You had a 3.96 GPA, which is stellar in its own sense, but you had that challenge being in the UAA, where you did have to travel a lot. So not only did you get to see the country, but you had to study while you were traveling as well. How much of the challenge did you have to adjust to there?
It was hard, especially being at Emory and I had a science major, so big chemistry classes, things like that. A lot of labs, a lot of studying. But I think the nicest part is, especially, being Division III, our coach understands that academics come first. So, for example, we didn't have practice on Mondays. So Mondays were the day that you take your lab or you work your internship, which I also did a number of internships while I was at Emory. So just having the atmosphere where everyone's in the same position, everyone on my team was studying. It wasn't like I was the only one doing it.
Sure.
So being in an atmosphere at a school like Emory with the athletic department that's aware of what's going on besides just softball.
You got into the School of Public Health and certainly were involved in that. What you're wanting to do is amazing. I don't want to try and paraphrase it, but third world health is certainly something that's deep in your heart. What are your hopes and goals, and how did you get involved in this?
So originally I wanted to go to medical school. So way back when, kind of like most people at Emory, want to go to medical school.
Sure.
And then I realized that there was more to healthcare besides just medical school, and that's when I found out about public health and about global health, and it's more about helping communities and helping populations all at one time. So that was sort of seems like a bigger impact. And so I got into it. The classes at Emory, there's a great undergraduate department. That I found out about the graduate school. I've done a number of internships, the CDC, a couple different places around Atlanta, and then I went to Ghana over the summer, and that was my first exposure to global health, and I was just, I loved it. I loved being in another country and learning about a different culture, but then you really realize there's so much need and there's so much to be done, and I've been so fortunate in not just the healthcare that I've had, but the experiences and the people I've been surrounded by and playing sports, opportunity to play sports. And so going forward, I would love to be able to give other people that opportunity. And so, little kids love playing sports, so why not allow them to do that? And it's good for their health, it's good for leadership, teamwork, everything. So
We had another student athlete on in an earlier episode of the YD3 show, and she talked about doing the same thing, wanting to help third world, and she had the same experience, that going there was the trigger. How big and important has that trip been to Ghana been to really just kind of directing you in life?
It's crucial because you can read about it in textbooks, which we have to read so much about it in school, but until you go there, you don't realize how, number one, how much need there is, but then number two, how happy people are with what they have anyway. And so just being there and experiencing it is, that's always in the back of my mind when I'm learning about the new things I'm learning about in school, is that, that could have worked. Yeah, that definitely would have been better. And so just being there was, you had to do it.
The experience is everything. Before we let you go, what are you doing now? What are you hoping to do in the near future involving, obviously, all of this third world health?
So right now I'm in public health school at Emory still. It's a 2-year program, and I'll have my master's. I'm in the global health department with a concentration in public nutrition, and then I'm also helping there's a new need for physical activity at Emory because there's no physical activity department at the School of Public Health, but obviously it's very important. And so I'm really interested in physical activity and nutrition, and using that, there's tons of need in the U.S. for that. So obesity, things like that, using nutrition and physical activity, but then also in the developing world. And so using what I've learned and what I've experienced to work, I love working with kids, so to work with kids on these really important issues and having fun while doing it.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and congratulations again on the honor.
Thank you.
Megan Light, Emory graduate, former student athlete, obviously, and being honored with the NCAA 10 award here at the NCAA Convention. I'm now joined by Nicole Mishmerheisen. She is a graduate of Calvin College, which we certainly all know from the Hope-Calvin rivalries, but she might put everybody to shame. You are also an honoree of the NCAA 10 here at the NCAA Convention, and your story is fascinating. First and foremost, former student athlete runner who's won a national championship in the outdoor 10,000 and just missed out on the indoor 5,000 a couple times. What was it like, I'm very curious, to be a student athlete, especially in Central Michigan at Calvin College?
Being a student athlete at Calvin was amazing. It was one of the best experiences of my life, just getting to know the other people at the school and on the team. It was, something that was amazing to be a part of and something I miss every day now that I'm not have it anymore. But yeah, I wouldn't trade it for many things, for sure.
I certainly know Help Calvin, the rivalry in basketball, very well. I'd love to know, is that rivalry also exist in other sports, including track and including cross country?
Definitely.
Yeah.
The Hope Calvin rivalry is in everything. It's in sports, it's in basically whatever you can think of.
Name something.
They come up with a way to pit you against Hope. So they're both good schools, but obviously I'll go for Calvin every
sure.
time.
I figured you're a Knight. What was it like to prepare for a Hope Calvin, or in your case, it wasn't mano a mano all the time. Usually you were at another meet, but did it kind of raise the stakes if you saw Hope was going to be competing there as well?
Definitely, yeah. Hope was, the conference meets were a big deal, and Hope was usually our biggest contender. But then if Hope was going to be at an invitational, that was always a goal that we had to beat them, and make sure we beat Hope and whoever else we could at that invitational too.
How successful were you in your career?
We beat them most of the time. There was once that we lost, and it still makes my stomach turn. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
What's amazing about your story is that you found out at an early age that you had type 1 diabetes.
Yes.
And only now have people started to appreciate the fact that you could have diabetes and still be an athlete. There was a time where that was basically you could never do it anymore. Mm-hmm. That seemed like it was a passion for you to be a student athlete, and it seemed to help you be able to maintain kind of the monitoring of your diabetes.
Yeah, exercise definitely has helped me control my diabetes, and I think that it's just kind of given me, I don't ever want diabetes to be something that keeps me from doing something else that I love. So I'm really glad that I was able to participate in athletics, even though I was given this diagnosis when I was in 8th grade. So it's
and what's interesting is it also drove your academics. You really want to know more about diabetes. Can you explain to people what kind of was what you wanted to get involved in with the disease?
Sure. So after I was diagnosed with diabetes, I really started to learn that I was passionate about human health and about the medicines that we use to treat different diseases. And now I'm in graduate school, and I'm studying pharmacology and designing those drugs and how they can be used and better targeted for diabetes or any other condition. So that kind of gives me a passion for those areas of study.
I read a quote, I think I'm paraphrasing correctly, that being a student athlete and being in the career that you are, you're used to having challenges, you're used to it not always going your way, but finding a way to fight through it. Is that based in what you did as an athlete as well?
Yeah, I think definitely there's a lot of parallels between my athletic and academic experiences, and in research, which is something that I have been involved in and hope to continue to work in, an area I continue to work in. We are faced with a lot of challenges when you're studying something that no one else has ever studied before, and so you have to learn to push through those challenges and figure out a way to make things work. And it's the same way in running. You might not have the setup that you were hoping for in a race. You can't control the competition, but you just got to figure out how to make it work to the best way possible.
And you can't control Michigan weather either.
No, you definitely can't. I wish you could. You don't know how much I wish you could.
Obviously, you're a former student athlete. How much do you miss the athletic side of things to complement your academics?
I miss it a lot. I still run, and I really enjoy that, and I hope I never stop, or not for a long time, but it's really different to not be on a team and to have those other girls next to you all the time and see them at practice. So it's definitely something that I miss. But
And what does this honor mean to you, to be recognized this year as one of the top 10, student athlete stories in the NCAA, and we're talking all divisions, to stand up on that stage? What does that mean to you to receive this really tip of the hat from the entire entire NCAA?
it's really humbling to receive this award, and it's just something I'm really grateful for, and something I definitely couldn't have. I don't feel like it's just to me. It's also my coaches and teammates in school. I wouldn't have been able to accomplish what I did in athletics or academics without the support of so many other people. So I hope that this reflects back positively on all those other people as well.
And forgive me to have a little fun, you had a 3.99 GPA. What happened?
Well, one
Just
of the
missed
classes, one of the classes was actually volleyball.
Oh.
So, I'm not a very good volleyball player. But
You didn't have a conversation with him? Come on, help me out. I'm trying to go for a 4.0 here.
No.
Volleyball at Calvin too. I mean, that's a pretty big one. That's a good
true.
program.
At least they have a good reputation.
I
It's not
know.
like I got a bad grade in volleyball and it was at some school that's horrible.
Yeah,
No, I had a
no.
high standard to live up
Yeah,
to.
you did. Maybe that's why it was. Yeah, the standard was a little higher
Yeah,
maybe than
there
other
we go.
schools have. Well, congratulations on the honor. Congratulations on doing something that you are afflicted with and trying to make it better. It's certainly a
Thank
wonderful
you.
story, and I appreciate it.
Thanks.
We'll have plenty more coming up here on the YD3 Show.
What makes D3 special is the ability to participate in my team and within the broader community.
The perfect ending to a perfect season.
Being a D3 student athlete has completely expanded my life.
I learned how to lead. I really found a voice.
What time is it? It's game time!
It's more about the experience rather than just a sport itself.
Without the experience of being a Division III student athlete, I wouldn't be the person who I am today.
NCAA Division III. Discover, develop, dedicate.
I know sports is important, but having the academic part along with it is a big plus.
I've discovered in myself, a newfound ability to overcome adversity at all different angles.
At a Division III school is really shaped around you developing yourself as a complete individual. The end result in my mind is you just become a very well-rounded person.
Before I came into college, I didn't really think I'd be able to balance so much. It helps a lot that you have a family with your team that can guide you.
With a D3 school, there's a lot of time for other opportunities. The coaches expect a lot of you during soccer, but after soccer, that's your own personal time to really find out who you are and other opportunities that you can pursue.
By balancing all of my interests, basketball, my leadership skills, and academics, I'm able to better prioritize my life and to manage it.
Welcome back to the YD3 Show and our studios here that we also share with Hoopsville. Appreciate you taking the time to enjoy the January show. We realize it's a bit into February by the time we got this show out on the air, and we apologize for the delay, but we promise you we'll get back on track here shortly with the February show. We'll tell you more how you can help us do that in just a few minutes. We usually have an honor roll every month. We're going to have a little bit of an abbreviated honor roll, mainly because the two topics we're choosing the student athletes to focus on deserve the attention for varying reasons. But if you have an idea for an honor roll member, we'll also tell you how to do that in a minute. First student athlete we want to point out is Lauren Hill. We talked about her in October, had a wonderful conversation with Brad Johansson, the reporter who's been covering her story the most out of the Cincinnati metro area. Lauren Hill still alive and still fighting, and certainly a tip of the hat to her. You'll notice we have a Ohio Wesleyan Bishop's number 22 jersey over our shoulder. It is signed, if you can tell right about there with my fingers pointing, by Lauren Hill herself. It was something we picked up on the auction to help donate money towards pediatric brain cancer, something certainly near and dear to the heart of Lauren Hill. What we should point out is she's still alive. The doctor said she may not make it till December. She's made it past Christmas, into the new year, and now into February. And most recently, her school, Mount St. Joseph, took the steps of honoring her. Not only has she, Lauren Hill, certainly raised awareness of pediatric brain cancer, but she has now raised nearly $1.5 million for The Cure Starts Now. And in a private ceremony held last week, she was given the honorary doctorate from her school, Mount St. Joseph, in a tremendous opportunity. The honorary doctorate of humane letters was bestowed on her. And we want to thank those, Brad Johansson and those at WKRC in the Cincinnati area, for giving us a chance to see Lauryn Hill, who had been in a hospital all week leading up to this ceremony, apparently getting her pain pump adjusted. You'll notice quite a bit of swelling that in her face. That comes from the steroids she is on that is trying to maintain the tumor as best as possible. She rose from a wheelchair and walked the distance down the aisle to get positioned for this ceremony, and hats off to her. She then, during the presentation, the university president, Anthony Arentz, had these poignant words to speak about Lauryn Hill.
Lauryn, you were called and you were asked by God to take an extraordinary journey. We don't know why you were called for this particular journey, but you agreed to do God's will and you embraced the challenge. You have accomplished much, even more than most of us here could imagine accomplishing in our own lives. You are an inspiration to us all. But it's not just your accomplishments that are being recognized this evening. It is also your character. And so, by the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees in the state of Ohio, I confer on you the degree for which you have been nominated and welcome you into the ranks of Mount alumni. Lauryn, you may change your tassel from right to left.
According to Brad Johansson, Lauryn had a party afterward and a little bit of dinner and dancing to be had. She certainly looks to be probably a little tired. Not that surprising, to say the least. But hats off to Lauryn Hill. Her next goal, according to Brad Johansson, is in April for a special festivity taking place there surrounding pediatric brain cancer. We certainly hope she can get to that point. But she's already outlived expectations and certainly risen above expectations for everybody. So our tip of the hat continues to be to Lauryn Hill. I've said it on the Hoopsville show. It does not matter what happens this basketball season. It does not matter if a team, an underdog, wins at a buzzer from mid-court. The best story this year is gonna be and will always be Lauryn Hill. Congratulations to her. Switching gears, the show is about YD3, and we got an opportunity. We always try and find out why student athletes come to Division III and why YD3 works for them. And what's amazing is we certainly talk to a lot of student athletes who are two-sport student athletes, something you really can only do in Division III. Division I with scholarships, there's limitations, not that it hasn't happened there. Division II, same idea, but again, not that it hasn't happened. But it happens often in Division III, and it's encouraged. Now, a lot of the time, it's a fall sport and a spring sport. Sometimes you get a fall and a winter, or a winter and a spring sport, and that is certainly the case up at Bethel in Minnesota. And our Pat Coleman ran into Bridgeport Tussler, who is 15.1 points a game for his basketball team, but also a standout on the football team as a freshman at Bethel. And Pat Coleman caught up to him recently after a basketball game to ask him why Division III was the choice for him and why D3 is important to him now.
So what's the basketball experience like at Bethel or in Division III for you?
It's phenomenal. I think right away I was thinking I didn't want to be classified as the football player who's playing basketball.
And you're not the only football player who's playing basketball here.
Correct. Yep. And I just didn't want to seem like I'm football and then I can play basketball too. I want to come in here and during the basketball season I want to be a basketball player. Once basketball's over, then I'll start working on football and so on. So I wanted to hit this head on. And I think for a while I was struggling a little bit, not even confidence, but just thinking body-wise and really seeing football guys getting bigger and bigger. And I'm starting to think, do I want to do that? No, I came here to play basketball too. The experience is unbelievable. Novak's a great teacher, great mentor. He's different than Coach Johnson, the football coach, but it's nice because I have Coach Johnson, who's like my best friend, like a father. He's honestly like my biggest mentor. But then you have Novak, who's my trainer. He teaches me about the game. He's a real coach, and he's teaching me more. He's coaching me in life as well.
Well, and for a guy who was Mr. Football here in the state of Minnesota to come and say you don't want to be known as the football player, that says a lot.
Yeah, I just think, wherever your heart is going, that's what you should do. And I really think for partially I wanted to go Division I because I wanted to be titled as a Division I athlete. And to me, once I was out there, to me, I could look myself in the mirror and say, like, I don't think Division I is for everybody. I think I can still improve my game. I think I can still improve and become a better man, whether I'm at a Division I level or Division III level. Competition, that's the game of basketball and football. And so coming down here, I learned a lot, realizing, and I'm not owned. I'm not ready for the real world, and I feel like Bethel's giving me the best chance to experience and teach me and mentor me until I get to the real world.
I want to thank Pat Coleman for giving us that sound bite from Bridgeport Tussler. Certainly want to root guys on like Bridgeport and others who are in it for the right reasons, as it were, and congratulations to Beth, who is having a pretty good season this year as well. That's a bit of our shortened version of an honor roll. If you have a student athlete you think deserves attention on this show, please let us know. It's the easiest way to do it is to reach out to us. Either email us, yd3show@d3sports.com, reach out via Twitter at @YD3show, or using the hashtag YD3. Or, of course, you can also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/YD3show. We certainly can try and find stories, but most times the best stories we get are those submitted by you, sports information directors at different schools or otherwise, and we certainly want to hear from you. That's also why we also want to hear the YD3 in 3 Words project. We've had a bit of a lull recently. We had a bunch of schools in the fall who sent us some terrific 3 Words contributions, but we haven't heard from a lot of you since. We are re-encouraging you to send in as many as you want. If we can't use them in a month, we will save them for another month. So please send them to us. It's the YD3 show in 3 words, and we certainly hope you will take the time to send them to our way. That is going to wrap up our January edition. One little note, we're going to change the titles of our shows just a little bit. Not the name, the YD3 show, but we won't technically have a February show. We're going to rename it the March show coming up. Kind of a ode to those magazine shows, magazines you get where you get it in June and it's really the July edition. Well, that's what we're going to do here. We're going to change our gear a little bit, and the March edition of the YD3 show will come out in late February. So we're not skipping a month. We're just retitling it, as it were. So we hope we don't cause any confusion as a result of that. Again, send us your ideas, and we will get them onto the show this month or in the future. I want to thank everybody who helped put this show together, including any sports information directors who have submitted ideas to us and anybody else who's taken the time. Also want to thank those who helped put the show together out at the NCAA Convention, Dan Dutcher, Luis McCleary, and Jay Jones, to just name a few at the NCAA office. Also thanks to Pat Coleman. We'll have more thanks to everybody who contributed to the show in the upcoming credits. That's going to do it for this January edition of the YD3 show that we released in February. We will be back with more in just a few weeks here on the YD3 show. In the meantime, don't forget to submit ideas or submit the 3 Words project for YD3 as well. Thank you. We hope to see you back here in just a few weeks.